Hey, Chapter 7 is a little bit more fun. Hopefully stuff you can grab a hold of. It's one I get myself in trouble with, because you're going to disagree with some of the things, some of the positions I've taken here and stuff, and that's okay. You can push back if you like. I've had people go tell the dean that they disagreed with me. That's all okay, and that's part of this, is you get to think about it a little bit, but you'll see I adamantly disagree with a number of things the authors contend here, and it makes me a racist and everything else. There's only about 11 to put in here. The lecture is long, but you don't have quite as much to do, so I hope you enjoy it. Chapter 7, I say it's stuff you're a little familiar with, and it'll just take you a little bit deeper in it. Diversity in Society and Schools, Chapter 7. First, let's take a look at where we're going. The first part of it is on race and ethnicity, and you'll have to distinguish. Look at these very closely, because there's several questions on the test separating this: race, ethnicity, immigration, and then this disparities in education. And same with this, the socioeconomic status. Questions on the test ask you to separate these topics. And so you have to have a solid understanding and comparison of those. Language, I'm going to ask you to carry some of this, and talking about how language, especially this about dialect diversity, and then there's different approaches, and there's tests, questions on the test about that also. Gender, and then sexual orientation, exceptionalities. I don't think they do a service to this. They touch on it and see how that affects schools and stuff. But as you know, that's a whole nother course. Religion is glossed over fairly quickly here. We'll try and pull that apart. The effect religion has. And then this multicultural education, I'm going to ask you to carry some of this also, but you will have to be able to discern these different terms: incorporating, responsive, validating, ensuring, equal opportunity, equal results, practicing, teaching for social justice. That's really a good one. There, they bury you with that one. So that's where we're going. It's long, and I'm going to clip along here for you. So the diversity, let's jump over a couple. It's where they start out talking about what is multicultural education, and they throw this word out, and I never can understand how you can put this word in something as morally, that someone would tell you and me what is morally correct. I'm not quite sure where that comes from, and I don't know what you base morally on, but apparently there's some common set of morals that we understand that they feel needs to be in here. I don't know where it comes from, but it kind of bothers me that we would talk about something morally, because to me morally is a spiritual aspect that comes from your faith, and they kind of poo-poo faith in here, it seems like. And so I'm very interested. Several times I'll make reference to morally moral things, and I'm not sure what that is. But regardless of this, and you as teachers have heard this before, regardless of their socioeconomic status, ethnicity, race, language, gender, religion, sexual orientation, ability, it doesn't matter. You, as a qualified teacher, will have the best in mind for all those areas. Lift up kids as teachers in respect of getting them to do their best. And I think they get kind of carried away here on this, but I have faith in you as a teacher to look beyond those things and see them as individuals and lift them up and encourage them and love them, no matter what their backgrounds or what their families are like. And I know you do. And for the most part, people that get into teaching, that want to be teachers, understand that. Talks about multicultural education in the school activities. The history and experience of groups studied throughout this is not simply periodically adding Black History Month or Women's History Month. It's integrating it through all your teaching and curriculum. And that's one of the beauties of Common Core Standards. They have done that for you. They decided how much of this to integrate into your curriculum. Let's see. This chapter will explore the groups to which their students and their families belong. Each section will discuss how a student's membership generally impact the student's educational. So first, race and ethnicity. I don't know why I have trouble with that word, but I do. But it talks about two groups here. The American Indian tribes and Alaska Natives are the only indigenous to this in the United States. They're the only ones that are here. So 99% of us are immigrants, the population, or their ancestors came here from some other place. And again, this is not profound. I didn't have to tell you that. Since our ancestors emigrated, a growing number of people have mixed heritage with ancestors, and so this is what we're going to do first. Is you're going to tell me what that is. Number one, it uses the word emigrated. Number one, what is the difference between immigrated and immigrated? And again, you're doing a good job of keep marking that in red so I can find what you're trying to tell me there. But it uses that term without explanation. And so you will lay that out for me. And then it goes on to these different ones, like the ethnic groups based on a national origin of ancestors, or a panethnic group based on just the origin from the continent, simply the continent. Two different things here. Pull them apart. For example, you're either from Africa or Asia or Europe. That would be your panethnic membership. Panethnic. One of the nation's policies, practices, and institutions. As a result, whites have advantages that are reflected in higher achievement on tests, higher incomes, and adulthood. This issue of race encompasses personal and national discussions of affirmative action, immigration, desegregation, colorblind society. Race and ethnicity may be linked, but are not the same. Both influence our cultural identities. Having a greater knowledge of the history and experiences of the diverse groups attending your school will improve your understanding of the students and families, and it can be fun and enriching. I taught in a diverse school, middle school, and it is very enriching to work with different cultural families, especially if you come from a homogeneous background like I did, where all of my world was white. And so it was really neat to work with different families and get to know them. And I worked with a lot of new people to this country that had been here a very short time, that didn't speak the language and stuff. And at times it's challenging, and certainly at times frustrating, but enriching is a great word. You're going to come back to this. I'm going to beat on this a little bit later, because these authors are really into this white privilege, white advantage here, and I want to push on that a little bit later. So what is race? The first physical characteristic we notice when we meet another person is gender and race. And there's no doubting that. Let me go back here. We notice the physical characteristics, our ideas about race are created from our own experiences and reflections in the media. And yes, media tells us how to feel, how to think. And not only, when we think of media, sometimes we think of news, the news shows and stuff, but it really is much, much more. It's more has to do with entertainment things, movies and programs and music and TV shows and stuff like that. But skin does not fully capture the meaning of race. And let me take you back to this. Positive high status of our own race. This is interesting, this highlighted here. Our stereotyped views of race usually bestow positive attributes and high status on our own race, and negative attributes are lower status of others. And I think that's an excellent comment. I wish there was some documentation here. That's their perception. I don't know how true that is anymore, but it's their observation. They certainly would have documented here. Skin color is a signifier, but it's certainly not the meaning. A lot of mixed, and this is what I think is changing things so fast, is how our races and even our panethnic backgrounds are getting so mixed that we see folks that have everything. Even the current president of the United States, President Obama, is this. His mother was as European as could be, and his father was African American, and so he, even though he's dark complected, he's as much white as he is not white and non-white. So he really has become that leader for that. Goes on here, persons of color usually identify themselves with their race or ethnic group, are confronted with the race almost daily encounters with employers, salespeople, colleagues as they watch the evening news. Whites, on the other hand, are seldom confronted with their race. In fact, they seem themselves as raceless. White has become a norm against which persons of color are classified. As a result, many whites are unable to see how their race has privileged them in society. And I think that's interesting, and why what I was pushing on this is this stat here, and this is just the poverty rates in the country and of white privilege. And if you look at it across the United States, the number of people that are considered impoverished, here's 25 million white, and the next closest one are Hispanics at 17 million. And so somehow we forgot to tell these 25 million that they're privileged, because they're still in poverty, considered in poverty. But that's a pervasive thing throughout the text here, is that's what's wrong, is the white privilege. You know, and if you have a problem with me saying that, you need to go to the dean and tell the dean of ed if that offends you, but that is their theme through here, even though they don't have any documentation. And like I said, they forgot to tell this group here about that. National origin of our family and the primary determinant of our ethnicity, and that would be true for all of us. And you know what your national origin is and where that comes from. Let me jump back here. Again, are unable to see how our race has privileged us in society, and I'm telling you, I came from very, very modest means. My great-grandparents were new immigrants to this country and came here with absolutely nothing, and built their way into society and lived full and meaningful lives. And maybe it was because they were white, but that wasn't easy, and they never considered themselves poor or underprivileged. They were poor, but they didn't consider themselves impoverished at all. And I say, here is the thing of that. And I was considered impoverished. I got free reduced lunches as a white boy 40 years ago, and so I was part of that group. Okay. So the primary determinant, yes, is our origin, and why is it we do that? Because we share these things with our origin, and it strengthens as members as we support to those groups. Okay. Okay. Here's the thing I want to show is this: what the makeup of our country is, and I have that here for you. Is still the biggest percentage, 64%. Are white or non-Hispanics, and then here's the Asian group is 4.8, black or African American 12%, two or more races. And I say, and this gets a little sticky because this is all self-identified. This comes from the Census Bureau, 2011, the census. So it's whatever you mark on the box, and so I would think this would be much bigger than it is, but you get to decide. You self-identify. Here's the biggest, fastest growing one, the Hispanic 16%, Native American at 1%, a shrinking number here. So that's the makeup of it. And schools are early recipients of this. Unauthorized immigrants do not possess appropriate papers. That's an interesting term, I think, the unauthorized. Here they're talking about who they are. German. That's me. My great grandparents came here from Germany, and almost 100% German, and came here. And I think the authors do a great job of going through here, and you look at this of all the different places and origins people have come from. It's very, very interesting. I say, and part of that is the Germans, and at the time from Europe, this was the biggest group that were fleeing there. And I do have, I think, 1/8, or now it's 1/16 Polish. On my mom's side, one of my great grandparents were half Polish, and so that's so. And this is interesting too. And I'm going to ask you to bring this in by the year 2050. The European Americans will comprise less than half. And if we go back here to this, right now it's 64%, and they're saying by 2050 it'll be less than half. And so that will be, let's put that right here. We're going to say this is number 2, and it's by 2050. And again, you'll make that nice and red for me. Less than half. Okay, so how about immigration? The United States is often referred to as the land of immigrants, and you and I know that. And I would say 99% of us came from immigrants who left their original homelands because of economic hardship or political repression. Now, this is how history has changed. When I was studying history 40 years ago, you know why people came to this country? You know my great-grandparents came to this country? For religious freedoms. Religious freedoms. They were oppressed. Their faith was being oppressed. The church had a state church. Why our founding fathers were so adamant about not establishing a state church, a government church. And so it's so interesting that now in the histories, in my kids' history books, that's been completely scrubbed out of there. I'm not sure why, but I'm telling you, that's why that clause came in there, because so many of us Europeans came here for religious freedom, to worship God as we saw fit and not be bound to the church. The only oppression we ever get is from government. Government was oppressing us. The government said, we have a state church and you shall do as the church says. People don't oppress us, governments do. And so it's so interesting to me that's been scrubbed out of our history, that we came here for religious freedoms. But I don't get to change that. Maybe you do in your time. Maybe you talk about that. But here it goes on to say, however, this picture is only partially true. The groups that have suffered most from discrimination are those indigenous or whose ancestors entered the country involuntarily, meaning they were here. Okay. So it talks about that. Ancestors of most African Americans were brought involuntarily to be slaves, and that's what I'm going to ask you to do here. It does a nice job of going through these different groups. And so here's the African American, here's Latinos, how they came, and here's the unauthorized part. And I don't get that terminology because that really is not unauthorized, they're illegal. They came here. They're in this country illegally, and so I don't quite get how we can use that term. So I'm going to change this here. They've broken the law to get here, and so. They do not possess the appropriate papers to be here. And it doesn't just the ones that came across the border. Some came here on visas that expired and they're still here illegally. Federal law, not DSU law, not Tim Fegan law, not South Dakota law. Federal law has established this, and we just decided in the last 4 or 5 years not to enforce that federal law. And so we have more here, and they make a case in the textbook about how we have less. Where is that here? You constantly face deportation, loss of everything they've gained. You may know students whose parents are arrested, things like that. 62% of Hispanic students have at least one foreign-born parent. So what I was saying earlier here, I'm going to ask you, this is interesting too, let me show you this about the Chinese Act, that it says here, and I don't know about this, that they felt there was too many Asian immigrants, too many from China. So they put this law in 1882 saying that there'd be way less of them. And then, of course, this is the big one that you don't hear anybody talking about that I think will happen again, and that is in World War II, when the Japanese invaded Pearl Harbor, we started to round up the Japanese in this country and put them in internment camps. And then it was, they were held there, and they just wouldn't allow anybody to immigrate from Japan. They thought they were infiltrating us. It'd be interesting to see where that goes going forward, but that's why I think that could happen again. It may be me, maybe me this time that's in the internment camp, but we have a history in this country of twice rounding up those people and putting them in prison just for what race they were. Oh, the other one besides the Japanese? Well, that's what we did to the Native Americans too, is we rounded them up and put them in reservations and stuff. So we have a history of that, and I predict it'll happen again in your lifetime. And just from your background or who you are, and not what you've done, it will give you a ticket to that. So you be aware of that and see that that don't happen, because I'm going to be old and not be able to help myself. But I want you to identify how these different groups came to be here. The first of the African Americans here, and then the Mexican Americans here that are here legally, and then the Chinese here, Americans, well, they came, and the Europeans came here. And so I'm going to say this is number 3, and you're going to talk about each of those. There are, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, African Americans, Hispanics, Chinese, Europeans, and so those 4 groups, why they came here, why and how. And again, because you're going to want to know that for the test. So that's number 3, and there's 4 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4. Do that now while you're thinking of it. I'll wait for you. Okay. And then schools are early recipients of new immigrants. They're affected first before the general population. More than 1 in 5 students has at least one parent who was born outside the United States, and that's an incredible stat. And of course, that still comes from the Census Bureau, which is self-identified. There's nobody marking that. Somebody. Each one of those are filled out by the individual people that are counted, and of course, not all fill them out, but you self-identify how you want to be identified. And immigrants today are settling beyond the traditional urban. Traditionally, California, Florida, Illinois, New Jersey, New York, Texas were by far the biggest ones with immigrations. But now, of course, they're reaching here into the central United States and the red states here in the plains. As you know, we have more people new to this country than we used to have. And they're just looking for, more opportunities. They migrate in farther to get better jobs. And, of course, still freedom of religion. We fail to talk about that. And some oppression with that, becoming more diverse at a faster rate. And here's this table that talks about that, and that is here, the kids that are in school are in green, and then the population is blue. So the white kids, we still have more people in the population than we do in school proportionally, but that's the only one. Well, in gender also a little bit, but it's just trying to make the point that as they get into school, the percentage of them show up in our schools sooner than they do in general society, or certainly create some awareness. So then this racial and ethnic disparities in education, and students of color have a long history of inequitable treatment in society and education. They have closed the achievement gap. And that's what I like to hear, that I'm tired of hearing about the achievement gap. And I think we can lift everybody up with you, quality teachers that have good training and a good heart to lift up everybody. And I can't imagine a scenario where you're picking and choosing who to lift up based on their racial or ethnic backgrounds, but that's what's implied here. And today's schools place a greater emphasis on academics of all students, regarding their race, gender, economic status as students. And yet of color, except for Asian Americans, are not yet participating in the same levels as whites in higher level courses and programs, nor scoring at the same level. So why is that? Why do Asian Americans, let me go back here if you would, to this here. Here's the thing. Asian Americans representing 5, let's just call it 5%. Why do they not fit here? Let me read that sentence to you again. Although today's schools place a greater emphasis on academics for all students, regardless of their race, ethnicity, and gender, or socioeconomic status, students of color, except for Asian Americans, are not yet participating at the same levels as white students in higher level courses and programs, nor scoring at the same level of achievement tests. Okay, for example, African American student participation in advanced placement courses, performance on AP exams is far below that of other groups. What is it with these Asian Americans? And so I'm going to take you here, and we're going to go back to this week's, and we're going to put let's have a nice robust discussion about that. Why are Asian Americans more successful in school? And it's without exception, and that's what all through this chapter we have to keep making these caveats of why or of this group does not fit. So they're immigrants, they have all the same thing, but for some reason they don't fit the stereotypes or the narrative we're trying to make here. And I don't know what to make of that, and I would like a nice, robust discussion about why that is. So please respond, and you've done a pretty nice job. Some of you omit this in your studies, and I'm going to put that over here now on the notes. Where are we at here? Okay, I'm going to make this number 4 discussion. Discuss Asian Americans. Okay. So they don't fit. They seem to do well, even though they come under the same circumstances and stuff as everybody else. Hispanic students are more likely to be in math class taught by teachers who have not majored in math. And they give a good case here of what happens. And just listen to this if you allow me. So they have less participating advanced. Hispanic students, of course, their performance on AP is far below that of other groups. Hispanic students are more likely to be in math classes taught by who are not majored in math. And that, again, No Child Left Behind was to address that. The classes in which students of color sit generally have more students than any other schools. They change schools more frequently than white students and have greater fear for their safety in schools. So why is that? They change schools. People of color and low socioeconomic status change schools more frequently, much more mobile. The mobility is way higher. And when I taught in a low-income school, it was unbelievable. About a third of our students turned over every year during the school year. A third left, and a new third of them came during the school year. And so it's very interesting, that change. All these factors have affected cognitive development and academic achievement. So could I put that in here also? What number was that? That was number 4. Number 5 is, why are they more mobile? Why do students of color and low economic students more mobile? Why do they move so often compared to the others? You address that there. So let's go on to this social economic status, SES. And from here forward, that'll be the term, and you'll hear about this on and on in your schooling and in everything you do. We'll talk about SES, and that's just a measure identifying a family's standard of living. Standard of living. Our families has a great impact on our chance to attend college, attain a job that requires material and comfort in life, and determining one's occupation, income, and educational attainment. Wealth and power are other important factors that affect the way one is able to live. But the data is difficult to measure. We may be able to guess a family's socioeconomic status, such things as where they live, their jobs, the type of car they drive, and the schools where their children attend, the types of vacations they take. You know, look, yeah. And you knew that. That's not new and profound to you. You knew that. So this social stratification, and I'm telling you there's a ton of questions on the test about this. So this is what I just gave you. Social is the primary indicator of family or standard of living. It impacts chance of attending college and obtaining a job. It is measured by occupation, income, and education, mostly this one. And possible indicators is this neighborhood where they live, the type of job or car one drives, school that children attend, the types of vacation the family takes. Okay, so that, and again, I'm telling stuff you know, but the biggest thing from all this is the income they have, because that income is tied to, obviously, occupation, education, your ability to attend college, even attain a job often has to do with your income because of how you are able to dress. And it's so much deeper. It's an entire course, entire graduate programs on studying this intricately. But there's so much more that goes with it, because folks that aren't well educated speak differently, don't have the same vocabulary. There used to be a commercial on the radio that said people judge you by the words you use, and those words come from education. And it shrinks education, learning, schooling dramatically expands your vocabulary and the words you're able to use and understand. And part of that comes from reading. The more you read, you get verbs, you get vocalization, you get more words and vocabulary. So here's the social stratification, and I say there's about 5 questions on this on the test, so make sure you have a solid understanding of this. It has to do with the ranking of individuals and groups along social structure, right? And there's a thing on social structure here. Here's class structure. But let's just look at this here. Wealth, income, occupation, and education are key variables to this social stratification. Race, age, gender, religion, disability also contribute. Okay, and Northern, Western Europe backgrounds are at the highest level. And social mobility, highly valued, difficult for poor to do, to go upward. Okay, an individual from wealthy families positioned for success. And they make this like it's a bad thing. Okay, so I'll go right here. Social mobility rate is one of the core values in the culture. We are told that hard work will lead to a better job, higher income, and better chance to participate in a good life. Read stories of individuals who were born in poverty, but though through hard work became wealthy as corporate presidents, successful writers, athletes, entertainers. Although upward mobility continues to incur, the chance of moving from poverty to riches, no matter how hard you work, are low without interventions such as college and lots of good luck. And I reject that completely. I firmly believe this that people that study, that can lift themselves, as a teacher, I wholeheartedly reject this whole notion that the only way out is good luck. Education is obviously the silver bullet, but we have a lot of self-made millionaires that are not educated people. And I don't have to go back. Times have changed. My father is not an educated man, has done quite well for himself, as a lot of our ancestors did. But even today, this country, you still, other than the oppression of our government, there's still, we all can succeed. And you, as teachers, will be instrumental in that. And I think that's what we do to kids more than anything, is we breathe hope into them. We encourage, we uplift them, no matter what the scenario. And so it just bothers me that this is the contention of this author, that you can't do it, it can't be done. And I wholeheartedly disagree, and I hope you will join me in that. Because the author's contention is this: individuals who are born into wealthy families are likely to attend good schools, finish college, and find high-paying jobs. They are raised with high expectations, have the economic resources to assist them in meeting these expectations, and usually end up meeting them. And I think they make that as a bad thing. They're insinuating here that this is a bad thing, and what they're absolutely insinuating, it's not fair. So would we contend that the thing we should do is limit the access that people from affluent families have to good education so that it's more fair? That's the contention here. That's where I adamantly disagree with that. And you probably disagree with me, and that's okay. But as teachers, this rubs me the wrong way, because I think that's one of the things we've done to our kids is, in fairness, in the name of the fairness, we hold back kids that could do more. And we don't have enough expectations of any of the kids. And I could whine about that for the next 15 minutes about my kids' examples of that, of them not expecting enough, not pushing them, kicking them hard enough. So, like I said, make sure you know some of this terminology. There's about 5 questions on the test about social stratification. Then class structure, and this is very interesting that they break this down, and you know this too, but there's a working class, supposedly, a middle class, and an upper class. and it gives you some different things for each one. Let me just read you. The working class manual work. Working class or blue-collar workers usually have little control over their work. Work is often sporadic, limited benefits, often requires little education. And then income ranges from this middle class, $38,000 to $100,000. 40% of the population are in middle class. Did you know that? Includes professionals, managers, administrators, wide range in lifestyles among income continuum, usually attain professional or advanced degrees. And I know there's a lot of middle income families that are not college educated, but doesn't seem to fit here. And then, of course, the salt here is the upper class, the wealthy and socially prominent families, limited interactions with other classes. Children really attend public schools, and that's, for the most part, in our area here, we don't know this group of families. This is often comes from what we call old money. And so, yes, they often go to private schools, same gender schools. They often go to, their formal schooling is often in boarding schools and stuff like that. So rarely do we see a truly upper class people as our classmates here, in South Dakota. So let's look at that here. Like farm labor is a big one they talk about. Most people don't perceive themselves as poor. They fall in here. This is interesting too, and I don't understand these authors how they're jacking this around here. But I thought, let me read you about middle class professionals, managers, administrators in this group expect to move in a more affluent upper middle class as they progress in their careers, with the goal of becoming of the 11% of the families that earn more than $150,000. And again, that's by the U.S. Census that they get that thing. Census Bureau. Don't click on Census Bureau, yeah. So anyway, so 11%. And so they said that's the goal of middle class, is to get up there so you make more than $150,000 and you'll be in the top 11%. Professionals are men and women who have usually obtained professional advanced degrees. They include, and this is interesting, teachers, lawyers, physicians, college professors, scientists, and psychologists. And again, they include teachers here, but you'll see in a minute they're going to quickly run from that. But the thing is here, for the most part, a lot of teachers don't hit 150,000, but a lot of teachers will break the 60,000 barrier that they said is the average in this country. Highly well. But look how they run from that now. Excluding teachers, most of these families earn far more than a median income of 60,000, and I disagree with that. That's early in your career, but you get to the coast, to either coast, and 60,000 would be an average teacher salary, not the top. And so it's very interesting, their contention here, to quickly cut those out of there. Successful executives and business people are the managers and administrators in this group. Listen to this phrase here in dark. These workers usually have more autonomy over their jobs, working conditions than working in lower middle class. Okay, I want to ask you this also. This is, again, what bothers me about this contention that's here. These people that are become the managers and administrators, they have more autonomy in their jobs and better working conditions. But what do they also have? They get the headaches. They are in charge. They're the first to lose their job. They're the ones that get fired if things aren't going right. They have more job changes than a lot of other folks. It's kind of like administrators in our schools. They make more money, but holy smokes, they have more headaches. That their job is to deal with the headaches. And so again, that's in this discussion from these authors, they don't mention that. They simply are contending that in this lack of fairness, they make more money. And here's the other thing, teachers. We all have that same opportunity to advance to that level. No matter what these authors say, we all have that opportunity to advance. We're still in the United States of America. And yes, it's going to be harder for somebody that doesn't get a good formal education, that comes from different backgrounds, but it can be done. And that's what we as teachers do. We encourage, we uplift, we love, we support. Don't go with what these authors are contending that it can't be done. It can be. The upper class consists of wealthy, socially prominent families. The income wealth of members of this class are far higher than those of other classes. The gap is growing, and it's grown more in the last 5 years than it had in years prior to that. Protests such as Occupy Wall Street in 2011 brought attention to these salaries. And man, do you remember that group? You're going to get to do that. They really made a mess of things. I'm going to put that right. I'm going to bring it back here. Occupy... You would have to have been asleep not to hear of that. I want to see what number we're on. We're on number 6. and I know some of you thought that was great, supported that, but I want you, number 6 is, you put a statement in here what Occupy Wall Street was about. I know there was lots of arrests, there was crimes, and they let them sit in the federal parks on the National Mall there without contention. They let them do a lot of things that nobody else could do, but I know it created a lot of problems. And the worst thing, the people they bothered the worst were not the upper class that they wanted to punish. All the people in Wall Street that were just folks like you and I doing their jobs in the middle class, the ones that really got punished through all this. So I'm not sure what it all was, and it was just very unbelievable in this country that we would do that, but we did. And the textbook here is, in my opinion, endorsing that. 1%, and I'll read this bottom to you, and this is what I'm saying, that these authors are into this. 1% that included corporate chief executive officers and Wall Street executives. The incomes of corporate chief executive officers have grown dramatically over the past 30 years. In 1980, they earned 42 times as much as the employees. By 1980, they earned 85 times as much. In 2010, the multiple had grown to 325. And that's what's so interesting, is that it continues to increase, is that gap. But again, what we're not allowed to talk about here is what responsibility they have in those also. And we can point out some very, very bad ones that are very, very corrupt, but we leave off the 95% that are honorable people that give their money away and take care of people. Doesn't fit the narrative, so let's not talk about that here. Again, it contends that this group contribute to limited interactions with members of other class. Children in these classes rarely attend public schools. They're isolated from peers of other social classes. The greatest assimilation of lifestyles probably occurs among members of ethnicity and culture groups in the upper class. Okay, so how about poverty? Let's go back and look at that. And this, you found this earlier church study, is the guideline is $23,000 for a family of 4. Approximately half of the income needed for basic needs. In 2009, nearly 43 million people and families lived in poverty. And again, I will say to you, the greatest number were white. 25 million versus the next closest 17 million, 12 million. Percentage-wise, not, but number-wise, this represents the greatest number are whites. Of the 43 million, 25 million are white. And that's 10% of all families in poverty. Children, the elderly, and other persons of color suffer disproportionately from poverty. Okay, so let's go back to the text and see what it has to say about it. 14.3, it says here, 8 million families, differences in poverty among different groups due to disparate education, incomes, unemployment, all those things. The median income of white families is $62,000 in 2009. African American and Hispanic families 61 and 64% income families, and so they lay that out here. Thus, 44% of the children lived in low-income families, often making eligible for free or reduced lunches. And that's the thing too, that you see this number and it breaks your heart, but you realize if you stay under this number, you qualify for about 14 different federal programs. Not your free lunch, but you also are entitled to housing, heating oil, a free phone, car assistance, insurance assistance. I mean, if you can keep if this number's under here, you're entitled to a bunch more programs, and your entitlement is dramatically raised. And it's still not a great existence, but as the saying goes, and it doesn't fit the narrative here, you're not supposed to talk about it, but it's a lot better to be poor in this country than in any other country in the world because of how well we take care of our poor. Impoverished people that are in poverty, I say, do have cell phones, do have TVs, do have music, do have iPhones, iPads, a lot of things that everybody else has. And I think that's a real attribute to our society, that we take good care of this. But it doesn't fit. Like I say, you see the authors here, they're beating more on this thing here about how unfair it is, the people that make money, and not about how well we care for these. Racial and ethnic groups there, that's another thing. Okay. So here's social economic status and achievement, academic achievement. and this you know too, but students whose parents have not finished high school do not perform as well on standardized tests as students whose parents have finished high school. And again, we're not sure how to change that. Factors that generally correlate with higher incomes is better education. If the parents didn't finish, for some reason, that's well connected. And this is what I'm charging you with as the future teachers, is to change this. Low-income students also do not perform as well on the other tests and are given annually to samples of 4th, 8th graders, 4th, 8th, and 12th graders. And factors outside of school also contribute to this. Students of color from low-income families are more likely to be exposed to, get this, environmental hazards such as lead and mercury. The chance of these being hungry or eating non-nutritious foods are greater than their more affluent peers. School factors contribute to low at this. Access certified experienced teachers. They're more likely to have substitute teachers because teachers are absent more than schools than their students from higher incomes. Turnover of teachers in the year-to-year is greater. Students have also less access to technology in their schools. And I think I would disagree with that because a lot of our low-income schools have become more connected, more technological. Maybe they don't have the teachers to operate or to really take advantage of it, but I saw an article one time that they tended to have, higher a percentage of kids in those schools had smartphones than in the more affluent schools, and that was a study done in 2011. So, yeah, you see here, and this is interesting too, that they get free reduced lunches, they get government subsidy for food stamps and stuff like that, but still they tend to eat more non-nutritious foods, and of course with that, much higher rate of obesity in low-income families also. Not supposed to talk about that, so I'm going to scratch that one too. Receiving a quality education for critical for low-income students to improve their chances of entering college and earning middle-class income. And this is us. As a teacher, you should hold high expectations, academic performances. I think there's no greater calling to us as teachers than this, than to lift up kids that are going to struggle. And just like they said earlier, it'll take you about 15 minutes to identify some of these kids, and I will challenge you to befriend and lift up and encourage and support and love these kids as long as you have them, because the challenges are going to be great. This is a table just shows those achievement gaps in reading on those standardized tests. We can run back here. Yeah, if you don't finish high school, they're not performing as well on standardized tests. Low-income students do not perform as well on standardized tests. Receiving quality is critical. And I think the most critical part of this is you, the teacher. Biggest single determinant of success in school is the teacher and the attitude and the approach of the teacher. And one of the things I could talk about back here is often we don't get the best teachers in these low-income schools. They're absent more, they're not as qualified, and the turnover, the first time they get a chance to go to a different school, they leave these inner-city low-income schools. Well, what about language? What role does language play? And this is pretty well documented for you also, is this language thing. More than 57 million residents speak a language other than English at home. Spanish is the language most often, and you knew that. That's the biggest immigrant group in the country, followed by Chinese, Tagalog, French, this. Did you know that was a second one? Spanish is the first and Chinese the second. So if you want to learn another language besides Spanish, don't do French or something like that, do Chinese. Okay. You also have fine students from these countries: Haitian, Creole, Urdu, Swahili. I know Swahili. We have a group that meets at our church from Swahili that are Christians, and they're all new to this country. Native language is often replaced by English within a few generations, as was mine. Within a few generations, they're replaced by English, and my understanding is my grandparents couldn't wait to learn English. They came to this country, have never spoken this, and even my grandmother used to speak a little German, and she would say to me, to us kids, I miss saying that. I'm starting to forget how to speak German. It's more likely to be retained when schools and communities value bilingualism. As commerce, trade have become more global, professionals in this, they are encouraging children to learn a second language. A lot of places it's required that you have a second language, and the most common one, of course, is Spanish, yes. Movement in some states for English-only usage in schools and daily commerce. Street signs on this highlights dominance of English desired by citizens. Ballot initiatives in Arizona, California, Massachusetts have banned the use of students' native language for instruction. There was lots of controversy over that. And that controversy was, if your school building is predominantly Spanish speaking, should you do instruction in Spanish even though you're in this country? And of course that gets heated. I'm sure if I put that up as a discussion question, you all would disagree with each other. And it talks about American Sign Language here for people that are hearing impaired. There's no questions on that. This is interesting too, the dialect. This thing here. Here's the dialect thing. Different dialects, and you've heard this. Each dialect has its own rules, knows its users. Some schools allow standard students to use a dialect other than standard English. And I'm saying you want to prepare kids. Make sure you're adamant about standard English things. Here's this 57 million. This Spanish is the most often. The second is Chinese, of course. 20% of school-age children live in homes where languages other than English is spoken. Most commonly used language is American Sign Language. And don't forget that there's a number of sign language out there, but the most accepted one is American Sign Language. And what are these different education for language diversity, like a bilingual education? 4 popular approaches, and here's those 4 popular approaches: content-based, pull-out, sheltered English. I'm going to ask you to do that, to tell what each of these are. And so what number are we on? This is about number 7, I think. Yep, I'm right on it. Number 7 is this. Going to this one, number 7. You give a description of each of these. 1, 2, 3, 4. And it comes right here from, starts on page 175. Okay, stop now and go do this, then come back. Okay. These bilingual and two-way immersion programs, and have a good thing here too about what they are. Make sure you take a look at that. There's a couple questions on the test about that. And these newcomer programs. And what are these newcomer programs? Well, they kind of give a synopsis here. Designed to help immigrant students develop basic English, provide instruction in core content areas, learn common culture, and develop strength their native literacy skills. I'm not sure why you would want to build their native literacy skills, because you really want to figure out the American English culture, but that's what they do. And a lot of school districts have exclusive programs for these kids that are brand new to this country. And so I'm telling you, I had kids that hadn't been in this country 3 months when they're in our classroom, and really a challenge to converse with them, but I say rewarding also. And here's our discussion question. This will be number 8. Should all students be bilingual? And again, I'm going to ask you not to respond to this until you've read both sides of this, yes and no. And it goes over into this page. So that's going to be number 8. I'll put it right here. Discussion. I have it over here for you under bilingual. Should all students be bilingual? Again, it comes to that. And please, some of you have kind of stiffed me on these discussions. It really doesn't work unless everybody participates. And so that's where we're headed with that. Now, that's number 8. That's not going too bad. So let's go to gender. Where we're going on that, we got 2 pages of that. The effective gender. Okay, and they acknowledge that boys and girls are different. Difference between males and females. Learning the gender of a baby is one of the important rights of a parenthood. We didn't know. Both of our kids were born. We never peeked. We never surprised. And I got two boys, and I was sure at least the first one was a girl, and the second one I wasn't sure. But we never peeked. We wanted to be surprised, and thank goodness they both were boys. Or the one we'd had a little girl or something wearing a lot of boys' clothes. However, the major difference in infant boys and girls in the ways we respond to them, there are a few actual physical differences, particularly before puberty. Yeah, but the brain is already wired. By age 2, children realize that they are a girl or a boy. By 5 or 6, they have learned their gender and stereotype behavior. In most cultures, boys are generally socialized toward achievement, self-reliance, girls towards nurturance and responsibility. Difference in expectations and behaviors of the genders may be rooted in their groups of ethnicity, religion, socioeconomic status. And they make a case here, difference between this, differently academic subjects, behave differently in the class, treated differently in society. And again, this is no surprise to you. You know that. How about gender equality in education? Stereotypes are sometimes reinforced in the classroom, like equality state of fairness and justice across the individuals and groups. Different instructional strategies may be needed in different groups. Title IX, have you heard of that? Equal educational opportunities for boys and girls. They do a nice job talking that. And again, there's several questions on the test. You have to read this. It's a very easy read about that importance. Okay. And then the gender thing, equity in education, talks about Title IX. And what that was about. Has been credited for increasing the number of girls participating in college preparatory courses, completing professional degrees in college, participating in sports. And that was a big thing. A lot of things were not ever noticed except the sports. And it really put some schools in a hardship trying to offer so many more sports to make it equal. Let's see, in the year that Title IX was passed, only 7% of law degrees are earned by females compared to 46 now. 8% of medical degrees, 13% of the doctors percent are awarded females. Now today it's 49% of all medical degrees, 52% of all doctorates are this. Okay, and sports associated with higher levels of family satisfaction. I don't know about that. Sports can go kind of crazy. Many families report their daughters do not have the same opportunities to participate in organized sports in high school as their sons, and if that's the truth, the school is not in compliance with Title IX. Although Title IX has led to dramatic increases in the number of females involved in sports, providing the equal opportunities have been most controversial part. It requires that percentage, and this is what makes it hard, percentage of male and female athletes to be substantially proportionate to the percentage of males and females in the student population. And why I say that, because football is the killer, and if you're running a school and this is killing you, get rid of football. Ah! Yeah, here's why. Because football takes so many. If you're in a big school, you could easily have 100 kids, 100 boys playing football. Well, it's very hard. You have to offer a lot more sports to get 100 girls involved. And so that's why, if I were you, get rid of football, and that'll never fly. Nobody wants to see that. But that's why it's been a hardship, because you have to offer so many other sports to equalize football. Where otherwise, if you just have basketball, track, those can all be equal. They're the same. But football's the killer because you don't have a balancing one for the girls that has that many. And of course, what still is that traditionally, maybe it's our fault, maybe we stereotype wrong, but you still see less participation in girls' sports than boys. And I say maybe that's the fault of families or culture or what have you. But is it okay if girls don't want to be in sports at the same rate as boys? I think it is. The authors are disagreeing here. They're perceiving it as that should be all the same. And we have some wonderful participation in girls' sports, but it all came from federal law, Title IX. Here, the number of girls and women participating in sports has increased dramatically since Title IX was passed. Fewer than 300,000 in 72, more than 3 million high school girls now participating. The number of women participating in college sports was 32, and now it's 184,000. So that's that. All right, so now sexual orientation. And because of academic freedom, I'm not going to do this one. You are. And so what I'm going to ask you simply to do under here, you need to read this because there's some questions on the tests, but you need to add one more here. Supporting these students, you make another bullet here, and I believe this is number 9. And one more here, thing about supporting this group. Okay. Then exceptionalities, and I think this is the group that's the biggest challenge, because when we say exceptionalities, we talk about a huge range of kids. Okay. When we say exceptionality, let me just do a little search here. Let's do like this, call it exceptional. Exceptional children, you see all kinds of things, because often is exceptional children this somebody with severe disabilities, or is it somebody with very, very mild disabilities? And so when we talk about that exceptional children, these look different. For example, specific learning disabilities is a dramatically different disability than somebody down here that has multiple disabilities, or even this one, intellectual, formerly known as mental retardation. But yet this category is all lumped together. It's all, if they qualify for special education, it's all called exceptional children. Okay, and so very interesting. 54 million people, or nearly 20% of the population over 6-year-old, have a disability. 12% a severe disability. So 12%, and this isn't the population, 12% of this 20% have severe disabilities. Some people are born with a disability, others develop a disability due to accidents or illness. Older people are more likely to have disabilities, with half the population over age having disabilities. 13% of public school population who receive special ed services have disabilities listed in 7.7. So, and that's about a common number, about 13%. And it's steadily gone up. We used to say 10. Now we say 13% of school-age kids are, and not that that's the ones that are identified. That's the ones that fit on this table here. The biggest group is learning disability, second speech and language, other health impaired, because used forever and ever it was intellectual disability known as mental retardation. What other health impaired is ADHD and ADD. And so that one is skyrocketed above than these others here. And autism is the next fastest growing one. And so 13% of the population that are considered disabilities fit on this chart. So roughly 1 out of 10. And the thing when I'm saying that is a number of kids that come in your class that have a lot of characteristics of somebody with a disability, especially a learning disability, but don't qualify. And it's kind of hard to qualify now to determine a learning disability. All right. So let's go back to this. Here's the problems. Often low expectations for student disabilities. Face discrimination based on, I mean, again, on its face that looks rough, but what that comes from is somebody that looks severely disabled. You make some assumptions maybe you shouldn't. And I've worked with kids that are severely disabled but still had their mind were at least of average intelligence, but it was often locked in a body that didn't function. So that was some of the discrimination. As you look at somebody that can't communicate, is in a wheelchair, doesn't have any words or anything, and you make some assumptions there. Inclusion fully integrates all students and requires collaboration, and they do a great job about talking about that here. The IEP, again, a SPED 100 term. What is that? Individual education plan. Time students that may be pulled out of the classroom, but these should be less. And you hopefully you have a background in that. They must individualize lessons for that group with IEPs so that they can be successful. And I think of all the groups we've talked about, exceptionalities and diversity, this is the one that'll challenge you the most. This is the one that'll challenge you the most. And of course, there's some overrun between the two groups. A very disproportionate number. All students can learn and require accommodations. African Americans, ELLs, low-income students, disproportionately placed. And I don't know what the alternative to this is. You know, they make a case here that there's a disproportionate number in special ed from that. But what is your alternative? Individual disability requires students' disabilities to provide a free and appropriate public education. African Americans, English language learners, and students of low-income families are more likely than their peers to be in special ed. So it kind of runs over now, this group, from some of the other groups we talked about. Students labeled intellectually disabled or emotionally disabled are disproportionately from low income. And again, I'm going to ask you, why is that? Why do you think that is? That these kids with severe disabilities, either mental retardation or emotionally disturbed, are disproportionate from low incomes. Meaning, if we go back here, let me go to this one. This is what disproportionate is, and we've hit on this before, but proportionately this, that if there were fairly proportionate, 64% of kids with mental retardation and mental illness should be white, 5% should be Asian, 12% black, 1% Native American, 16% Hispanic. And this is from the U.S. population, but it should mirror the population of your school. So if your school had 64% of the kids be white, 64% of the kids in special ed should be white. That's what disproportionate is, relates to that. So if you ever hear that terminology, you ever hear it talked about being overrepresented, that's what overrepresented is. That, for example, we may have, 10% of all Native American kids in our school are in special ed, when they only make up 1% of our student body. That would be overrepresented in special ed. And that's their case here, is that there are these disability categories. At the same time, and here it is again, Hispanic, African American, our students are underrepresented and gifted. But see what's the alternative to that? Okay, so same thing, that if 1% of your student population is Native American, 1% should be in your gifted programs. And the thing I would contend here, how do you rectify that? Do we develop these programs for these kids if they're not don't qualify in that? And again, the thing that's not mentioned here that blows this away is this group. Very, very underrepresented in special ed. Very underrepresented. And again, as we did before, we're not sure why. Because this follows the narrative we want to follow, and that is that these are more likely to be African American, Hispanic, Native Americans, but not these. They don't fit. They don't fit the narrative. So we drop those from the conversation. I wish they would have talked about that here. Why isn't that in here? Why isn't Asian Americans part of this conversation? And they would explain why, but it doesn't fit the narrative they're telling, so they drop it. Disproportionate placement of students in special ed and gifted education programs may be due to a number of factors. Test use for placement may be biased. Low-income students, English language learners, and students who have not assimilated into the common culture. Some educators who recommend students for special programs are intolerant of cultural differences. Do not want students in a class who they believe may disrupt the classroom. Now, they're making that as a bad thing. Is it okay for you not to want somebody in your class that's disruptive? And maybe that's their racism, is assuming that. But I think if that's your belief, schools should monitor recommendations and placement to find out if students have some groups are being disproportionately placed in SPED programs and take corrective actions. But I say to you again, what shall we do with students from these different groups that we're calling out here? If they need special programming, should we deny them into special ed so that our numbers are proportionate? I'm not quite sure. Then response to intervention, and I'm going to let you read this too. That is a program it's relatively new, but it's a new way to determine this. And I'm going to ask you what number we're on here, about 10. Number 10 here is write a little something about this. Here's number 10 about RTI. What about it? All right. And religion. How does a religion affect stuff? Well, it can influence values, schooling, experiences. Is essential to many people in determining cultural identity. Religion in schools, the First Amendment prohibits establishment of religion or prohibits the free exercise of religion. And as notes said, prohibits the establishment of religion and prohibits the free exercise of religion. And that's what it is. So we forget that sometimes, and it talks about that. Religious literacy may contribute to intolerance and hate crimes. I don't know about that. By age 5, children are generally able to identify their family's religious affiliation, although 64% of the population reports that religion is an important part. 64% say it's an important part. Less than half attend religious service on a weekly basis. So let's do the math there. So 64%, so less than half. So we're going to say 30% of our culture attends religious services regularly. Okay, that's why it's easy to make fun of them, as we do. However, strong religious practices are reflected in daily lives of many. It seems low. I was sure that number would be higher. The 64 doesn't surprise me, but the less than half attend weekly services surprises me. I guess I grew up in a world where everybody I knew attended. I didn't know anybody that didn't attend regularly, and my kids don't. My kids are so used to going. It's just a regular part of our life. We're those freaks that has a lot to do with our cultural identity and our social identity. And it's going to talk about it here, but a lot of our community centers around church and church friends. So I guess we're one of these 30% freaks here. Religious pluralism flourishes in the country with the influx of immigrants from these countries, Asia, Africa, and Middle East. The past few decades, diversity among populations is more. And then some of these non-Western ones, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, are on the rise in our country, and that's the beauty of our country, this free religion, freedom to practice religion that is not allowed in a lot of other countries. I think we're doing a lot to crack down on this, the freedom of religion. I think we've done a lot to stomp it out in our schools. One of the things you got to know here is the Catholic is the biggest single one, but Protestant. There's a question on the test: what's the biggest group? The biggest group is Protestant yet in our country, but slipping. There's a question on the test. 3 and 4. I want to give you this: 3 and 4 in the United States identify themselves as Christian. 4% identify themselves as Jew, Buddhist, Muslims, and others. 16%, a growing number, 16% are atheists, agnostics, or others that are unaffiliated with a religious faith. And again, that was self-identified on the last census. Although they are not as dominant earlier, Protestants comprise over half of the population, Catholics 25% of the population. And that's not the whole population, that's the ones that declare themselves Christians. In each of the major religious groups, distinct denominations, and that's what makes it a little bit so fragmented. As you go back to these, that you think of like the Lutherans, how many factions of Lutherans there are, as there are Baptists and Pentecostals and Presbyterians. There's a lot of classes, but they're all considered Christian. This is where I want to bring you. Religion in school, learning and to read the Bible and apply its moral lessons were foundations of early public schools, and that was well documented in the history of schools earlier in this course. Gradually, the Bible was removed from public schools as the curriculum became more secular. However, Bible verses are still being read or praying being said, or prayers being said at open school days in some public schools well into the 21st century. I would almost assure you that is not happening today, and if it is, I'd like to know where that is, because that's it would be a rarity. And here it is. I found a site that talks about the end of prayer in school. 3 landmark cases. The first in 1962, Engel versus Vitale. Name of it was Regent School Prayer, and then School Prayer, Murray versus Colrett, 1963, and then ultimately the deal breaker, School Prayer and Bible Reading, Abington Township School versus Shemp. And so prior to that, it was not uncommon at all to have school prayer in our public schools, a Christian prayer, but it was in the 60s, and a lot of us whiny believers would still say that was the beginning of the downfall. And now, of course, as it's saying here, we have completely scrubbed Christian values and Christian things out of our schools. And so they're contending that some still start with prayer, as I'm saying that's not true. You're not going to find that. Let me just go on here. The First Amendment indicates that Congress shall make no law respecting establishment of religion, and that was a reaction to so many coming here for religious freedom to get away from the Church of England. Okay? So no law respecting an establishment of religion, so they can't make a law that establishes it, but or prohibit the free exercise thereof. And that's what I think we've lost our way in schools, is we're so terrified of this establishment clause of religion that a kid comes with a cross or something on their shirt, we send them home, make them change, admonish them in some way. Many court cases during the past century have helped to sort out the application of this section of the amendment. Families are generally satisfied with schools when the schools reflect the values are important in their religion, but they may attack schools when the curriculum assigned readings, holidays, school convocations, and graduation exercise are perceived to be a conflict with the religious values. Court cases have addressed the teaching of evolution, religious clubs in schools, the Pledge of Allegiance, citing the Bible, religious holidays, school prayer, teaching about religions. Other cases address teachers' religious liberties, rights, and this. So we've been all over the board about religion in schools and prayer in school and stuff, to the point now, I say, most of our schools are too chicken to do anything, so they just run and take cover and just ban everything that comes close to it. There are many misinterpretations, misperceptions about how religion can be addressed in public schools. Educators, let me go here because this is what I want you to know. Educators cannot say prayers or require students to pray in school. So, is that contending that you can't pray privately? I would take cover if I were you, if you want to pray in school. But you cannot lead the prayer required your students. And again, I don't have to tell you that. You know that. However, students can pray in school as long as it's not disruptive and doesn't infringe on the rights of others. And that only applies to the Christian faith. I think you can be disruptive and have time for some of the other religions, but in the Christian, and so that gives us that power. Teachers can teach about religion, but they cannot privilege a religion, promote their religious faith, nor degenerate the beliefs of religious groups of non-believers. The Equal Access Act of 1984 allows students to establish religious clubs in secondary schools if other clubs exist at the school. And with that, one of the things that makes our schools turn and run and take cover and chicken out is that if you allow these religious ones, you have to allow all religious, including witchcraft and any of those others. And so this is the way we've been able to stomp out a number, I shouldn't say we, that's the way a number of good clubs have been stomped out, is because with it comes all the others. And that's just the way it is. The Pew Forum on Religion, Public Life reports that we have little knowledge about religious other than our own. This religious illiteracy may contribute to the growing intolerance among anti-Semitic and Islamophobia, hate crimes. I thought the hate crimes were the other way. But the teaching of religions may be helpful in providing this tolerance of our neighbors and the religious and faith traditions. Public schools can offer courses of world religion and other studies. Okay, so that is that. The state, government can't establish a religion, but they can't prohibit the free exercise of religion, especially if it's not disruptive, and that'll be, and this contentious here, this might be the problem. So multicultural education and diversity, social justice, and provide qualities. And so this is going to be you, and this is number 11, and this will be your last one. And that is, you're going to get to add something about all of these. So number 11 is you make statements, because these will all be on the test. There is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them. This is number 11. And they're all laid out here, and you're going to make a statement and study each of these. Okay. These are interesting here. These are classroom and schools are multicultural and models of democracy and equity. Requires the educators to do this: place students at the center of teaching and learning, promote human rights and respect to cultural differences, believe that all students can learn, acknowledge, and build on the life histories, experiences, critically analyze oppression and power relationships to help understand racism, sexism, classism, discrimination against persons with disabilities, gays, lesbians, and the young and the need. Here, this is interesting. Critique society in the interest of social justice and equality. Interesting. That is one of your jobs, I guess. And number 7, participate in collective social action to ensure a democratic society. What does that mean? So interesting here on these two. They don't really give a description what they are, but there they are. And especially a collective social action. A democratic society. But can you do this for me when you're teaching social justice and collective social actions? Can you give a balanced approach to every issue? Can I ask you to do that? Often in schools we're one-sided, as are these authors. So I'm asking you to be fair and balanced and give a complete pro and con of every issue. Because otherwise we go into things like they mentioned earlier, pollution. And what's both sides of pollution? The social good, as long as the social harm, or no? Okay, then you don't worry about it. But that's what I would do if I were you. If you're really an equality person, you would give both sides of everything. Then incorporating diversity, cultural responsive teaching, that'll be you with multiple perspectives. And you're going to have to read every word of this to understand it. And I'm telling you, it's all on the test, every one of these. Validating student voices. There's several questions about voice. Validating student voices. There's several questions on the test about that. And during ensuring equality, schools and educators should question whether the policies and practices are equitable. One step is that the investigation should be examined how accessible, gifted, talented, and honors programs are to the students in diverse groups. Truly, egalitarian society ensures not only that their schools are safe, adequately staffed, and supportive of learning, but also that the schools, other people's children have the same amenities. Such society works toward the elimination of racism, sexism, and other forms of discrimination in education. Okay, and this is good. Schools reflect the inequities of the broader society. As you consider some of these inequities, ask yourself the following questions. How fair is it for students to attend school in dilapidated, foul-smelling, crowded buildings while others attend class in beautiful buildings with future-oriented technology and well-groomed schools? Okay, I don't know what to think of that, but let me go on. How fair is it that wealthier students are exposed to an intellectually challenging curriculum and experiences, while many low-income students have only a limited number of advanced placement classes offered in their schools? And how accurate are curriculum and pedagogy that do not reflect the rich plurality of school histories, experiences, perspectives? But what is the implication here? That this is unfair, so we should take these away? That we shouldn't allow this? That nobody should have nice schools? I mean, that's the implication here. If you have a beautiful building, future-oriented technologies, and the lack of fairness, it shouldn't happen. Same with these gifted programs that just become more affluent families. It's not fair for you to have that. I'm telling you, that's how we function often. Is fairness is we don't try and lift up those without. We try and pull down those that do. And I'm begging you as teachers to don't look at it that way. That's why our overall ratings, I believe, in our schools today are slipping, because we're holding down some of the kids that could lift us in the name of fairness. Everything we do, we can't do it because it's not fair to this one small group here. And I know you and I live in that world of fairness, but I'm telling you, my kids are the ones that get clipped in this deal. that don't get the maximum of what they could because it's not fair. And so therefore let's hold them down so that it's fair. And I don't understand that thinking. And that's really the whole theme of this chapter is fairness. And it sounds good on the edges, but what is the other side of that? And that is some of the kids that could do well and excel are going to be held back because it's not fair to push them hard. Okay. Quality of results. Schools today are expected to provide all students with the opportunity to learn and outline the math, science, English, and arts, foreign language. All these do not expect U.S. students to meet minimal standards. They expect them to meet high scores of international ones. If educators actually believe that all students could learn, they would ensure that all students have access to higher level knowledge. Students would not be tracked on low ability and boring classes. They would promote critical thinking and ability to view the world in academic subjects. And so I say to you, why is that not happening? When the goal is to ensure equity of results, students who do not perform well academically or in other ways could become intellectual challenges for a team of teachers and support personnel. The focus would be to ensuring learning rather than simply moving students from one grade to another. And that's what I would challenge you with, is not promoting kids that haven't learned, that they become studies, and how can we lift up? And so that the whole thing here on practicing equity in the classroom. And then my favorite, teaching social justice. Social justice focuses on how we help others who are less advantaged than we are. Most religious measure of this, moral commitments. Okay, and here's where my challenge with this is. This is what we do as family. This is what my church community does. We spend time and our money on social justice. I didn't realize it was a school thing. Again, here's that word, moral commitments. How can we have a discussion about morals without faith, without religion, without personal beliefs? And this is interesting too. Students can learn to apply the knowledge and skills they're learning to a logical, regional, or global issue. Learning becomes authentic because it's related to the world that students care about. Students can take their community projects that examine pollution in their neighborhoods, political stances in the regional area. So what their social justice is, you need to take a political stance. And I'm okay with that as long as we as educators are teaching a balanced approach to all issues. And it goes on here, students and teachers who take social justice as an integral part of their classroom work are providing multiple education and Reconstructionism. Do you remember what Reconstruction is? You have to reconstruct society. Our society is unfair, and for the most part, that's what's believed, that our society is unfair, and therefore your job in school is to reconstruct it through political stances. I'm going to say you got to go above and beyond that. You got to be better. You got to lift up everybody, not just the ones that think like you. They're doing more than learning about the world. They are working toward making it better for those who are least advantaged. Okay. Social justice. So that will be you, and that'll be a big one where you write for each of those, and that's your number 11. Chapter 7, diversity.